This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. It is Tuesday, October 15th. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, the death toll is still rising in Turkey's invasion of Syria as the U.S. and Europe try to stop it. But Turkish President Erdogan remains defiant. We're going to have a report from the Middle East. The biggest debate yet, as 12 Democrats will be on the stage together this evening, taking on key issues including impeaching President Donald Trump and health care, as well as possible tax increases. And it could be one of the most devastating crises to ever hit the United States, yet most people don't even know about it. We're going to show you what it is and how it could affect you. And a new type of surgery that can be especially effective for people who've had a stroke. We've got those stories and much more ahead in today's edition of Newswatch. We want to begin, though, with the brutal fighting in Syria as Turkey has defied the growing condemnation from its NATO allies and pushed ahead with its invasion of northern Syria. The president has announced sanctions on Turkey to restrain their assault, and the U.S. has also called on Turkey to stop its offensive and declare a ceasefire. As Chris Mitchell now reports from Jerusalem, the fighting is changing the face of the Middle East.
Fighting continues along parts of the Turkish-Syrian border, and the results are grim. Forces allied with Turkey are accused of committing more atrocities. The death toll is rising, and more than 130,000 people remain displaced. But now Syrian troops, along with Russian assistance, are changing the face of the battlefield. Syrian army troops began to deploy along the border and take up positions in key Syrian towns to confront the Turkish advance. While the fighting continues in northeast Syria, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence will lead a delegation to Turkey after the Trump administration announced new sanctions.
The sanctions that were announced today will continue and will worsen unless and until Turkey embraces an immediate ceasefire, stops the violence, and agrees to negotiate a long-term settlement.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham promised even more punishment during an interview on Fox and Friends.
He's going to see a united front that I haven't seen in a long time, where Republicans and Democrats working with the administration are kind of come down on him like a ton of bricks, Iranian-type sanctions, and he deserves it.
Yet Turkey's President Erdogan is still defiant.
Turkey, with Operation Peace Spring, has taken a vital step as important as the 1974 Cyprus peace operation. Without paying any mind to threats and pressures, we're determined to take our operation until the very end.
In the meantime, the White House said U.S. troops have been deployed to southern Syria to prevent a resurgence of ISIS. So far, hundreds of ISIS supporters have escaped from prison and fled. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
CBN's George Thomas is joining us now from Syria. So, George, you're traveling with a well-known Iraqi Kurdish aid group that's partnering with Operation Blessing. Tell us what they're bringing and where they are going.
That's correct. Let me just give you real quickly a setting of where I am. What you're seeing right there is the famous Tigris River, and I'm on the Syrian side, and that's a floating a bridge. I'm on the Iraqi side, sorry. That's a floating bridge that connects right in front of you is Syria. And so the Barzani Charity Foundation has about 30 trucks filled with all kinds of critical supplies, oil, water, food, rice, flour, salt, and all kinds of other beans and so forth, that is supposed to feed about 20,000 people. So I'm just getting the signal that we're about to make the trek across this floating boat into Syria, and we're going to go to a town called Hasaka, which is about an hour away, and there's about 100,000, maybe 100,000 to 130,000 refugees, Syrian Kurds, who have fled from northeast Syria.
So is it safe for you and the team to go in right now?
Right now we have sort of the backing of the Syrian Democratic Forces. They are supposed to provide sort of a security corridor to get us to Hasaka, and obviously we need to be careful. But all signs are that we have the green light.
George, how much control has the Syrian army assumed so far in SDF areas? We seem to have lost George Thomas there. Let's turn now to Chris Mitchell joining us also. Chris, can you tell us, the situation is getting very complicated. Can you describe the differences between all the many players on the battlefield?
I can, Ephraim. It does get very complicated. First of all, the Free Syrian Army. Now, these are jihadists that are allied with the Turkish army. So, okay, that's the Free Syrian Army. Then the regular Syrian army, that's the army of Bashar Assad, and that has now come up to places along the Turkish-Syrian border. And then finally, you have the Syrian Democratic Forces. This is the military arm of the new government that had been formed in northeast Syria called Self-Administration of Northeast Syria. So these are three of the main players: Free Syrian Army, allied with the Turkish army; Syrian Army, that's Bashar Assad's army; the Syrian Democratic Forces, allied with this new democratic form of government. And then, of course, you have the other big players. You have the Russian troops, you have Turkey, and you have the United States, which is actually withdrawn from much of the fighting right now.
Chris, what does the new relationship between the SDF and the Syrian government mean?
Well, Ephraim, this is part of the tragedy of what's happening right now. The Syrian Democratic Forces have now become part of the Syrian army. This means that the self-administration government that had been formed for about 7 years, we went there back earlier this year. We talked to people, we talked to Kurds, we talked to Arabs and Christians, and this multi-ethnic, democratic, representative form of government had really sprung forth. Some people have called it a tree of liberty. Now, we don't know how much, but now it's going to come under the influence, at least in part, of the Syrian regime of Bashar Assad. Likely some of the liberties, some of the freedoms that people had enjoyed for many years may no longer be enjoyed.
Quickly, Chris, who are the winners and losers in the changes going on now?
Well, winners. Got to be President Bashar Assad. He's back in northeast Syria. He's wanted to be in there for years. He's now in there. Russia, it mediated the deal between the SDF and the Syrian army and the Syrian government. They're the winners. Losers. I think Erdogan is going to be a loser in the long run. The world is turning against him. They want to try to get him out of NATO. That's probably not likely to happen, but he's being isolated diplomatically. And Ephraim, one other loser, I think, would have to be the United States. Its influence in the Middle East is waning. It's seen as someone that has turned its back on its allies, that its word cannot be trusted. And so hopefully Mike Pence's visit, the U.S. sanctions by the U.S. Congress will make a difference. We'll see if they can regain some of that influence that's been lost in the last 8 days or so.
All right, Chris Mitchell reporting for us from Jerusalem. Chris, thank you. On this week's Prayer Link program on the CBN News Channel, Charlene Aaron and Wendy Griffith discuss the tension in Syria and pray with the Christian leaders who have worked in the Middle East.
And as Cannon White pointed out, the Kurds have been very instructive and helpful in helping the United States not only quell various enemies, but the chief enemy that we've had right now, which is ISIS. And ISIS has a chance now of reconstituting itself.
Now you can see our interviews with Kelly Wright, formerly of Fox News, and Andrew White, the former vicar of the only Anglican church in Iraq. That is this evening at 6:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel. Here at home, the Democrats will hold their latest debate for their presidential candidates on the campus of Otterbein University in Waterville, Ohio, a suburb of Columbus. It will be the first time in these debates 12 Democratic candidates will be on the stage at the same time. Among the key issues, the ongoing impeachment inquiry by congressional Democrats into President Donald Trump and the international business dealings of former Vice President Joe Biden's son, Hunter. Bernie Sanders will be likely asked about his health after his recent heart attack. And Elizabeth Warren may face questions over whether or not her health care plan would mean higher taxes for the middle class, a question critics say she has dodged. A new poll shows Warren with a slight lead over Biden, 30% to 27%. The Quinnipiac University survey has Sanders in third with 8%. The first actual voting among Democrats will be in the Iowa caucuses on February 3rd of next year. A Fort Worth police officer is charged with murder in the weekend shooting death of a woman. Officer Aaron Dean resigned yesterday and was booked last night on a $200,000 bond. Over the weekend, he responded to a call at the home of 28-year-old Atiana Jefferson. A neighbor had reported her doors were open around 2 a.m. and that was unusual. Dean responded to check out the property. When he saw someone opening a blind, he called out, "Put your hands up," and pulled the trigger right after that, never identifying himself as a police officer.
None of this information can ease the pain of Tatiana's family, but I hope it shows the community that we take these incidents seriously.
Our family now is asking the city of Fort Worth to exhibit the same characteristics of a Tatiana Jefferson, to be honorable when it comes to narrating the memory of this beautiful soul.
An attorney for the family says they are relieved Dean has been jailed on the murder charge. Coming up, it is one of the deadliest threats to America, one that could cause widespread devastation, even death, but few people are even aware of it. We're going to tell you what it is when we come back. Stay with us.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News.
And welcome back. Quick correction for you. Tonight's Democratic debate is actually in Westerville, Ohio, not Waterville, Ohio. Cyber attacks, electromagnetic pulses, and even natural disasters can knock out the power grid, leaving millions of people in the dark. National security correspondent Eric Phillips describes the threat and what can be done to stop it.
I want you to stop and think about how much we use electricity in our everyday lives, from water to ATMs, gas pumps, medical equipment, and the list really goes on and on. But now think about our nation's power grid that supplies that electricity and it being damaged or disabled for weeks, months, even up to a year. It's a very real possibility, and experts say it can happen in several different ways, but they also say there's something we can do about it.
We risk everything.
Frank Gaffney heads the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C. He's on the front lines of sounding the alarm about the vulnerability of the nation's electric grid.
Our electric infrastructure is very susceptible.
One of those dangers is what's known as an EMP, or electromagnetic pulse, which can happen if an adversary detonates a nuclear weapon in space, causing a burst of radiation that won't hurt people but would fry our electric grid. The same thing could happen naturally in the event of a solar storm. Then there's another naturally occurring process deep within the Earth that could result in what's known as a magnetic pole reversal. Dr. Hugh Ross talked about it on a recent edition of the 700 Club.
The biggest consequence is the damage it could do to our electric power grids.
What can we do? Gaffney says there are several effective steps the military took to protect sensitive assets some 30 years ago after discovering these vulnerabilities.
What are called surge protectors, sort of think of what you hopefully have your computer plugged into, only bigger. Shunts, which essentially move electric current around what you're trying to protect. And Faraday cages. And it turns out that, while we may not know it, almost all of us now have a Faraday cage in our homes. It's called a microwave oven.
These protective measures would cost billions of dollars, and at least one organization questions the need. The Electric Power Research Institute, or EPRI, is an independent nonprofit. In a recent report, it said while protecting the grid would be helpful, even without it, quote, possible damage to large power transformers was found to be minimal. Gaffney is critical of the report, saying EPRI is closely aligned with the electric utilities. He says their findings clash sharply with those of a federal commission that studied the problem.
And its chairman estimated that if the lights were to go out and stay out for a year or more, 9 out of 10 of us would die.
Gaffney warns those stakes are too high to take chances.
Even if no enemy used either what's called EMP or sabotage or cyber attacks to take down our grid with catastrophic consequences for our country and our people, Mother Nature is going to do it.
There's an ongoing debate about who would pay for an upgrade to the electric grid, whether it would be the government or electric utilities or some combination of big business and public dollars. I should also mention that I did reach out to EPRI for an interview, and they declined my request. In Washington, Eric Phillips, CBN News.
Still ahead, we're going from national security threats to your health, and we're going to tell you about a new type of surgery that can be very effective for people who've suffered a stroke. Stay with us.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Surgery on the brain sounds scary, but on this week's Healthy Living, Lori Johnson talks to a pioneering surgeon who explains a new technique that's less invasive and works especially well on people who've had strokes.
Neurointerventional surgery takes a giant step toward improved treatment for the head, neck, and spine. Instead of cutting into the skull or exposing the spinal column, neurointervention uses tiny incisions no bigger than the size of a nickel. The doctor threads a small tube like a catheter through the opening and into a blood vessel, then works from there. A machine like an X-ray allows the doctor to see what's going on inside the body. Dr. Richard Klosnick, the president of the Society of Neurointerventional Surgery, says it can be used to treat aneurysms, strokes, spinal compression fractures, and more. Dr. Richard Klosnick is here now to tell us more about this. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
You are one of the world's experts on stroke, particularly treating strokes with neurointerventional surgery. But we need to back up a little bit because there are a lot of folks watching now who don't really even know what a stroke is. They may have not had one in their family, and they should be grateful for that. But these things can strike at any time. So basically, a stroke is a blood clot in a vein or an artery in your brain. Talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, there's two types of strokes. We call hemorrhagic stroke, which can come from an aneurysm that burst, but more often it's ischemic stroke where a clot has come from someplace, either your heart or your arteries from having bad arteries. The clot goes upstream and lodges in the artery that leads to the brain, so one major artery that goes to the brain. And we have a kind of a quick mnemonic to remember so patients at home or the families can know what's going on. And it's fast, so you look at if you're talking to someone, their face starts drooping. Arm, if their arm is a little bit weak or something. Speech. We've had people on the phone with their loved ones, and their speech becomes garbled, and immediately they call 911, and of course time is brain. So those are the things to keep in mind for a stroke. That means a clot has gone up into the brain and lodged there. Now we have a certain window to try to get that clot out. There's a clot busting drug called TPA that is good in the first 4 hours, 4.5 hours, but it doesn't work for all the big major type strokes where a clot actually blocks a major blood vessel. And that's called a large vessel occlusion. And we tried to give it a fancy name, ELVO, emergent large vessel occlusion. We thought about using Elvis, but that'd be Elvis Presley, and we couldn't do that. So
that's a lot easier to remember, though.
It's a lot easier to remember. And in the last few years, we've had devices now that have come up, and we've had great success at getting the clot out. Mm-hmm. So we will go 6 hours, but we're extending the window now out to people even further on out. So what we do is we get the patients in, make sure to diagnose that they do have clot, mm-hmm. and we go inside the artery. So we go from either we say groin, but it's really the artery right over the hip, or sometimes from the arm. And you go up all the way to the arteries in the brain, and there are devices that are designed to pull the clot out, mm-hmm. and there are some devices designed to suck, actually put suction, and suck the clot out. And we're very successful at this day and age now of getting the clot out, and then reestablish flow to the brain.
Fantastic. It kind of reminds me of a cork in a bottle. You go in there, you get the clot out, and you yank it right out, and then all the blood can start flowing again.
Well, it's funny you say that because one of the first devices looked exactly like a corkscrew, but it didn't work as well. I'm probably not strong enough to do it, but it looked like a corkscrew. But it didn't work. Mm-hmm. So now we have newer devices that actually do work to get the clot out.
So back up a little bit. A lot of you talk about this window of time. You got to get these patients in your care. 3 hours is best case, 4 hours, 6 hours. You're extending it, but the faster the better.
The faster
so
the
we
better.
need to, but a lot of people don't recognize when they're having a stroke because sometimes it's not real obvious. You talked about FAST. When you talk about the face drooping and the arm, what about the arm? What are we supposed to look for with arm movement?
Just simple, just strength, overall strength. If someone's having trouble, pick up a cup of coffee, or they're just having trouble in general, their arm or the leg is weak. So we're trying to get, arm or mm-hmm. just something that you notice that they're weak on one side or mm-hmm. the other. Mm-hmm. So just something simple like that.
Yeah, so like if you're with someone and they're acting a little bit strange, you might want to say, Mom, can you pick up this cup of coffee?
Or can you grip my hand? Hold my hand.
Grip my hand. That's a good test
mm-hmm.
for it.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people aren't aware that they're having a stroke. So we really need to be on top of these symptoms. And then when you realize that someone's having a stroke, you've got to get them to not just any hospital.
Correct.
And that's kind of a tricky situation, too, because ambulance drivers are by law required to take you to the nearest hospital, but that might not be where they do neurointerventional surgery.
Correct. We want to go to what's called a comprehensive stroke center that has all the capabilities of people who can go and extract clot and get clot out. as well as having a good intensive care unit. We are trying right now, there's 2 programs underway right now. One is our society, the Society of Neurointerventional Surgery, has teamed up with Get Ahead of Stroke. It's called Get Ahead of Stroke. And that is a program where we're trying to go state by state by state. They've had great success at Tennessee, Florida, Ohio, working on Massachusetts and New York, where they go to the state legislatures and go and change the EMS paradigm. So the emergency medical service is when they go to pick up a patient for them to recognize there's a stroke, and a simple test that they can do. Any emergency medical person can do an exam they think that's a stroke, and then get them to a comprehensive stroke center.
To see the rest of the discussion, which includes aneurysms and back pain, tune into Healthy Living this evening at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel. When we come back, we'll have an encouraging spiritual word for your day today. Stay with us.
Give me that. Bye. Sure, life is busy, but I found a way to make a huge difference in people's lives. I guess you could say I'm changing the world right here from home. I bring medical supplies and doctors to people in need, and dig wells so that villagers can have clean and safe water to drink. I make it possible to preach the gospel in over 100 countries, including right here in America. And when disaster strikes, I'm there, providing food, thank you, and emergency supplies to give people hope again. Every day, CBN and I are making the world a better place. Here you go. My life is hectic, so I joined CBN through Pledge Express. My bank does all the work, and I know that my gift is being used where it's needed most. So become a CBN partner and join Pledge Express, because you can do a world of good right from where you are. Hi, good morning. Are you ready to get started?
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Get Protect Your Sleep and live your best life with innovative information from 5 leading sleep experts.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
Discover a sleep-enhancing bedtime routine, how to put insomnia to rest, learn how to relieve pain that disturbs sleep, and much more in Protect Your Sleep.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Don't miss out on this brand new series.
And welcome back. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. It's a message I hope will inspire you, and I hope you'll post, tag, tweet, and share it with those in your circles of influence. Remember this, your life's purpose is always bigger than you, and for so many more than just you. Consider this, your obedience to the call of God will always be a blessing far greater than you could think or imagine. With that word, I encourage you to make today a Tuesday, a terrific Tuesday indeed. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. Remember, you can find more of our CBN News programs on the CBN News Channel at any time, or you can watch online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. Feel free to email us. That address is newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, on Twitter, as well as Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. We truly appreciate your company, and thank you so much for watching. The news continues 24/7 at cbnnews.com. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody. God bless.